Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. We had a couple of weeks, or we took last week off anyway. We went to go visit friends and family. Hope you all had a nice couple of weeks. But we're back at it, back at the microphone, back to sharing hopefully some knowledge and some love of the game, and hopefully helping you with your game. In this week's podcast, we're going to be talking about one of the subjects that is our favorite, and it's something that basically permeates or pervades, whatever P word you like better, our teaching at We Are Pickleball, and it is the concept of intentionality. It is an extremely important concept that once you start bringing intentionality into your game, you're going to see fantastic results or fantastic improvements and changes. And then in the riff, I'm actually going to we're going to keep the intentionality theme going, but I'm going to give you some very specific things that you can do the next few times you're playing to add intentionality into your game. So stay tuned for the podcast. As a pickleball player, you are no doubt working on your game. But are you also working on your vision? Doesn't it make sense that better vision will lead to better pickleball? Not to mention better night driving. CJ and I rely on the experts at Visual Edge to help us track those balls so we don't ever miss a shot. If you're ready to take your vision and perhaps your game to the next level, join us inside Visual Edge. I'll link to it below. We'll see you inside. Are you planning on playing pickleball on an indoor surface, meaning a polished concrete or wood surface like in a gym? If you are, consider adding a pair of indoor pickleball shoes to your bag. There is a big difference between outdoor shoes made for a tennis court and indoor shoes made for a gym type surface. You can check out Tyrol's indoor shoes designed specifically for pickleball. It's the shoe that CJ and I both wear. I'll link to it below. Before we jump into the podcast, I wanted to mention to you, if you have not yet heard her podcast, Pickleball Fire, our friend Lynn Cherry does a great job over there. It's an interview-style podcast where basically Lynn interviews a varied number of guests from pro players like Dane Gingrich was recently on there talking about the mental part of the game. Really interesting discussion there. Yeah, she also interviewed USAPA members talking about paddles, things like that. So really varied interviews. Really varied guests. I highly recommend Pickleball Fire with our friend Lynn Cherry. Check that out if you don't do so already, and make sure you subscribe to her podcast to continue growing your knowledge of the game. So let's talk about intentionality. Let's jump right into this thing. Intentionality is a huge topic. There's a lot to cover in intentionality. It covers a wide swath of everything that we do in life. Even like listening to this podcast is an intentional choice. You more likely than not, you did not happen upon this podcast accidentally. So you made a decision to listen to this podcast. Different than the next song that comes on the radio in your car. That may be just an accident. You can pick the type of station you're listening to. That's intentional. But the actual song you're listening to may just be whatever the DJ selected for you. Whereas listening to the podcast, again, is an intentional act. So when we talk about intentionality, and it's something that CJ and I focus on inside We Are Pickleball, it is a overriding principle of everything we do inside of We Are Pickleball, which is to give players the tools that they need in order to be intentional pickleball players. And let me give you an example of the opposite situation, right? So let's talk specifically of a four shot in pickleball. It'll really help illustrate, I think, the difference between an intentional type of approach to the game and a reactionary type of approach to the game, which is frankly what I think the majority of pickleball players out there do, is reactionary play. We're basically just reacting to what's happening on the court, getting a paddle on the ball and hitting it over. And I'll repeat this, there's nothing wrong with that. As long as they're enjoying themselves and having a good time on the court, that's fantastic. But if you want to improve as a pickleball player, if you want to really understand the game better and have more confidence on the court, then adding intentionality is going to be important. So what happens when you're hitting a fourth shot? So the fourth shot is obviously hit by the return team. So you're hopefully up at the non-volley zone line, and you are hitting a fourth shot based on the ball that gets hit to you by the serve team, the third shot that they hit. A premise that is really important when you play pickleball when you're playing return side, is to preserve your advantage. So you want to make sure you're getting up to the non-volley zone line, you're locking that down, and you're making it as difficult as possible for the serve team to do its job, right? One of the ways that we do that is by hitting our fourth shots, particularly fourth shot volleys, so balls that we can volley. hit them in a way that keeps the serve team as deep as possible, making their job as hard as possible, right? Which is what we're trying to do. So what happens is a lot of times you'll watch a match or a game and you'll see a fourth shot gets hit and the fourth shot is hit short. So the fourth shot is hit somewhere where the serve team can step forward or move forward to hit their next shot, hit their fifth shot. So the question then becomes, why was that ball hit short? If the ball was hit short as a mishit, so you intended to do something different, you intended to hit it deeper, but you mishit it, that's fine. That's not what we're talking about here. Mechanical errors happen. You can improve that by drilling, repetition, things like that. The key, though, is did you have the intentionality of hitting it deeper? And what I would suggest to you is that a lot of times when you see a short fourth shot, so you see a fourth shot that lands shorter than it should, it wasn't a function of a mishit. It was a function of simply not thinking about it. In other words, there was no intentionality in the shot that was being hit, the fourth shot that was being hit. Instead, it was simply the player volleyed it, just hit it, and then wherever the ball ended up going, the ball ended up going without a lot of thought being put into it by the player. A way that that player can improve, the player volleying that ball, is by adding intentionality into the shot, i.e. hitting the ball as deep as reasonable based on where the serve team was at the time that the ball was hit. That's a very concrete example of the difference between reactionary play, in other words, volleying simply for the sake of volleying, in other words, without really thinking of where you're trying to hit the ball, versus intentionality in your game, which is where you start adding purpose to your shots as you play the game. So that's an example, again, of reactionary against intentional. And what you're trying to do, if you want to improve and you want to grow as a player, what you're trying to do is you're trying to add intentionality into your game, but not just on the court. So on the court's important, right? Where you're basically, trying to hit shots, in a way that hopefully makes sense, right? Or hopefully, at least having the intention, you can at least work with it, right? Maybe your intention is to do something X, let's say, and then later on you learn that, well, maybe Y is a better approach. Then you can switch your intention to Y. If you're playing a reactionary game, you don't know where it's going, whether it's going X, Y, Z, or anywhere. It's just going to go somewhere, and you're not really thinking about what it is you're trying to accomplish or trying to do on the court. You won't have as, we would suggest that you probably won't have as fulfilling an experience, as complete an experience, if you're not bringing intentionality into your strokes and into your game. But as I mentioned, intentionality is more than just where you're hitting the ball, just where you're selecting to hit the ball. Intentionality applies to all aspects of yourself as a pickleball player. It applies to before you get on the court, and I'll give you some specific, at least one specific tip in the riff so that you can start adding it to your game. But it starts before you get on the court. Are you getting mentally ready to play that day? Are you getting your body ready to play? Like, are you warming up and things like that? Are you taking care of your body between games? Stretching after you play so that next time you play, your body's not too tight. That's a form of intentionality. It also applies, like I mentioned, during the game, and it also applies big picture or to your improvement path, if you want to look at it that way. So if you're on an improvement path, you want to get better as a player, you want to learn more about the game, you need to add intentionality there. Are you working on your mechanics, right? On the mechanical pillar, are you drilling and doing things like that? Are you working on are you improving your understanding of the game? Are you working on your mind and body, not just getting ready for the day? That's one type of intentionality, but big picture, right? Are you seeking resources to expand your understanding of your relationship with pickleball and how the mind-body interaction works when you're out on the court? Do you have trusted resources that can help you if that's what you want to do, right? An example would be the We Are Pickleball Success Path. That's something that is a resource that's available to you that can help you as you progress as a player. Understanding what inputs you're taking in. For example, if you know that if you watch an Into Pickle YouTube video or a Better Pickleball YouTube video, you know that CJ or myself have thought about the video or the content we're giving you, and we're trying to give you content that's actionable and that you can use to actually improve as a pickleball player, and not trying to give you content that may not be may not be on point. And then, are you, do you have a plan? If improvement is part of what you want to do as a player, do you have a plan to help you achieve your objectives? All those elements that I mentioned are parts of intentionality and are part of what will allow you to get from where you are to where you want to be as a pickleball player. If you want some specific tips on how to add intentionality to your game a little bit at a time, stay tuned for the riff. If you want to have the most fun you've ever had on the pickleball court while at the same time learning the skills and strategies that you need to play your best pickleball, check out our VI Pickleball camps. If you want to be notified of upcoming camps and also just want to stay in touch and know what's going on with VI Pickleball, make sure you subscribe to our mailing list at wearepickleball.com. Just go in there, give us your email address, and we in turn will tell you when our next camps are coming up. This much fun should be illegal. All right, so how do we add intentionality into our games? How do we start bringing that into our games? I'm going to give you some very specific tips. You can jot these down. If you need to pause it, take out a piece of paper and a pencil. I'm going to give you some specific things you can do. And basically the idea is to build on each other. So I'm going to give you 2. Add those the next time you go out there. Then I'll give you 2 more. Add those when you go out there the next time, and then add 2 more. And hopefully you'll retain some of the prior ones, and they'll just build on each other. So the first one I'm going to give you is, let's talk about getting ready to play. So what I want you to do is next time you're heading out to the courts to play a pickleball therapy podcast. Pick any episode you want. Episodes 9 through I think 14 are all our interviews with Coach Pete Scales on the mental and emotional side of the game. Those are really good. You can listen to the intentionality one again if you want to. Basically, what I want you to do is I want you to spend, it's about 10 or 15 minutes, right, per podcast episode. Listen to it. It'll get your mind ready to play. When you get to the courts, make sure that you do a good warm-up and dynamic stretching. If you don't know how to do that, if you search on YouTube, type in the search bar on YouTube, type in Better Pickleball warm-up exercises. There's a good 5-minute program that CJ has on there. You can actually tag it and save it so that you can watch it on your phone when you get to the courts. Follow along with it. Do it at the courts. Get yourself warmed up and ready to play. That'll get your mind and your body ready to play. So that's first time you go, or first week. Do this for the first week. The second week, you're going to add 2 more things to your intentionality routine or regimen. 1, make sure that you practice returns of serve before you start playing. So practice your returns of serve. And then second, I want you to focus on your court position on your return of serve. So when you're returning serve, where are you standing on the court before the serve gets hit? That's really important. So basically, the other team's going back to get ready to serve. You're getting ready to return. I want you to notice where you're on the court and make adjustments as necessary. So that's your intentionality for the second week. For the third week, I want you to focus on where are you aiming and hitting your serve, and where are you aiming, hitting your return of serve. So basically, you're going to be, when you're serving, you're really focused on where you're trying to hit the ball. And when you're returning serve, you're going to be focusing on where you're trying to hit this ball. Those are intentional ideas or intentional things that you'll be doing as you play and as you prepare to play. And that'll start you down the path towards intentionality. And hopefully you can keep on building on those steps. Hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Hope the intentionality and the concepts are helpful to you as you continue to grow as a pickleball player. Remember that CJ and I, both on our YouTube channels, Into Pickle, Better Pickleball, and also through our We Are Pickleball efforts, are here to help you. If you're not on our mailing list, make sure that you subscribe at wearepickleball.com. You can also find out about our camps and other information. Go to wearepickleball.com, and there you'll find what CJ and I are up to. We will hopefully see you next week during the podcast. If you like the podcast, as we always say, please rate and review it on Apple or wherever you're listening to it. And if you liked it, share it with your friends. Remember, if you like the podcast, they probably will too. Be well out there, and we'll see you next week.